I could stay awake if I was full of caffeine. I like beans that are the freshest, fairly traded in premium. They're Arabica beans here in Canada. They come in many blends and roasts, including seasonal. And oh yes, half calf and decaf are options you'll treasure. Okay, you've either had enough of me singing, especially a Razzie-nominated song, or you want me to keep singing this Oscar-nominated song. So yeah, Spark Plug Coffee is what Steven Tyler and I were warbling about there. They deliver to customers in the United States and, of course, Canada. You'll get what you order within a week. My fellow Canadians can even brag about getting free shipping. And here's a suggestion I think you should take before we're killed from above somehow. Be a member of Spark Plug's Autopilot Coffee Club. That will get you deals, and you can also savor the perks. Plus, you'll save money on every order. Sparkplug allows you to cancel or even pause your membership any old time. Especially if you've been given the job of using a nuclear weapon to not destroy the planet. Nope, to save it. And you can customize to get what you buy when it suits you, not when it suits the company who sells you their Java. And this is not a Coffee of the Month club, people. It's just not. So put away the sexy animal crackers and find a computing type device that will let you enter sparkplug.coffee/HYES into it. That HYES promo code will save you 20% off your next order. Okay, Armageddon awaits us, Bev. Both the movie and the actual thing. I'm going to ask you to cue Andrew Luther to start playing our theme song that hasn't been nominated for any Razzies or Oscars. Yet.
And action! Have you ever seen
Armageddon? Hi there and happy almost 4th of July, movie freaks. Thanks for downloading the 522nd journey to a global killing asteroid known as Have You Ever Seen? Does that make sense? I don't know if it does. We review movie classics on this channel every Monday and every other Friday, and we just can't help spoiling them as completely as we can. I'm the guy who asked Michael Bay if it wouldn't make more sense to train astronauts to become drillers rather than the other way around. But then he told me to shut up. Shut the something up. Ryan Independence Ellis. And here's the lady who doesn't want to miss a thing. So they let her into the NASA control room. My wife, Freedom Bev.
That's me.
Notice that I'm the rocket ship that crashes and you're the one that doesn't. I love that Liv Tyler gets to be NASA control room. That's my family up there. Maybe you shouldn't be here. She should never have been in there. Watching from above but can't get into the room? All right, maybe, but in the room with them?
Under the circumstances, having a freak out about the safety of these people who are trying to save the entire planet from destruction.
But just her family and friends. Yes, they matter, but whatever it takes to get the job done. It doesn't matter if nobody comes back. That's the most important thing. Okay, the coming attractions trivia question for Armageddon. Billy Bob Thornton and Ben Affleck had won Oscars for screenwriting in 2 consecutive years, 1996 and 1997. Then they both acted in Armageddon in 1998, which most definitely wasn't on the shortlist for Oscar consideration for its screenplay. Those scripts, by the way, they wrote were Sling Blade for Billy Bob and Good Will Hunting for Ben Affleck. One other major cast member in Armageddon was also nominated for a screenwriting Oscar, although in that person's case it hadn't happened yet. Unusual, 3 actors in one movie that either won or were nominated for Oscars, but who's the other one?
We hadn't watched the movie yet when I learned what the trivia question was, and I had a little moment when we were watching it.
You did.
That's who it is!
An aha moment.
Because I was watching all these actors come on screen, and I was like, okay, definitely not Michael Clark Duncan. No, Steve Buscemi. He's directed, but he's never been nominated.
The guy who plays Noonan?
And then Owen Wilson came on the screen. I'm like, that's it. He was nominated for The Royal Tenenbaums.
Which maybe should have won. That was a great screenplay and a great movie.
Agreed.
Well, to your answer, I'll just say, wow. He wasn't quite a star yet in 1998. Owen wasn't, but he was getting there. He and Thornton and Steve Buscemi, Peter Stormare gave this movie indie cred and a sense of humor, which is one reason I like it. This movie is different in that way. Well, maybe other ones have some of these same things, but I feel like Armageddon cast a lot of actors you wouldn't expect in a movie like this that really give it a sense of fun. And I criticized that in some other podcasts. We did Independence Day, because we've done disaster movies the last several years around this time frame. Independence Day was 2021, and last year was Air Force One, both of which I liked a lot, probably more than this, but I still like this one an awful lot too. This might have the best cast of those three movies. And Air Force One is a great cast for sure. Independence Day has some excellent actors in it. And in all cases, especially Independence Day and Armageddon, people that became big names that weren't yet.
One of the reviews I was reading about this mentioned that this movie was made during the very brief period of time when Liv Tyler would be credited above Ben Affleck because he wasn't a big star yet.
He was fourth billed. Billy Bob, Bruce Willis, obviously, and then Liv Tyler. I made this up, by the way. Bruce Willis was second billed. It was Bruce Willis. I think Billy Bob was second, Liv Tyler, and then Ben Affleck.
Yeah. Not that this was the first film that got him credibility or anything, but I feel like this was the movie that made Michael Bay a household name.
Yeah, probably, because The Rock was successful, but not a monster hit, I don't think, even though I prefer that one. I think it's my favorite. It is my favorite Michael Bay film. And Bad Boys, I think, did fine, but wasn't some phenomenon. But this was, and I'll get to the numbers in a few minutes. There's actually some fascinating box office numbers on this movie. Okay, let's get into it. Armageddon it. Yes, Armageddon it. Who sings that song again?
I don't know.
Some band from the 80s. It might be Def Leppard. It was released by Touchstone Pictures 25 years ago on Canada Day, better known as July 1st, 1998. The movie had a huge budget, but worldwide grosses were what made this an unqualified success. Here at home, it wasn't really a hit at all because you got to basically double or even triple your box office. I've learned this in recent years. If it costs $75 million or something and it made 80, well, that's a success. But because of prints and advertising and all the rest that goes into it, you have to make a lot more than what your budget says to be successful. So domestically, it wasn't really that much of a success. It's almost like one of the fast movies. But internationally, oh yeah. Okay, Bab, the movie's 25 years old. So tell us what it's about and give us a skinny on Armageddon.
An asteroid the size of Texas is on a collision course with Earth, ensuring total destruction. So, NASA sends a ragtag group of roughnecks to space to drill a hole in the asteroid to blow it up with a nuke. Bruce Willis's Harry leads the team. He faces challenges from space fires, space debris, space madness, and egg-headed space nerds who don't know anything about drilling. In the end, he sacrifices himself to save the planet so that his team can go back to slowly killing it with fossil fuel extraction.
Little blip, let's do it our own way. Yeah. No rock from way out there.
No rock's gonna kill this planet, that's my job.
America, freedom, independence and freedom.
That sounds about right.
One thing, by the way, about The Rock, not the movie The Rock, but the one that's coming for the Earth in this movie, I'd forgotten exactly why the meteor shower happens in the very beginning and then also why other things happen before the big rock gets there. But it's because, I guess this asteroid went through an asteroid belt or something like that.
A comet knocked the asteroid out of the asteroid belt and sent it straight towards Earth.
But a lot of other stuff came too, and they were just ahead of it. So that's why New York gets hit in the beginning of the movie. Shanghai and Paris as well get hit.
Gives us that great destruction porn, you know? They had to do something to match the Independence Day viz. People loved that stuff, so they were like, there's some asteroids that mess up Earth, and they all happen to hit our favorite cities.
You're right, yeah.
The Pacific takes like half the planet up. These cities are just little itty-bitty dots on the planet, but the asteroids just happen to hit the exact perfect spot.
I was going to say that makes sense because the ones that are the size of Buicks and whatnot that Billy Bob says that do hit New York and so on, and then other parts of the world in the next few weeks, I guess it's supposed to be. But the Earth is going constantly. It's never stopping moving. So when you do the math and realize, okay, this asteroid is going to time itself to hit us, okay, I can certainly buy that. Okay, maybe that meteor shower in New York happens and then still the asteroid can hit us, but what about the stuff in Shanghai and China? They should have missed the Earth, you would think.
I guess the explanation is it's a vast array of things hurtling towards the Earth.
Maybe there are tons of near misses through that entire few weeks there. Okay, in a nutshell, I just said these cities, but here's the nutshell for Armageddon. They saved the world! Well, not Paris, or Shanghai, or a lot of New York. Not their fault, of course. And much like a movie that Ben Affleck was in a few years later, I think Roger Ebert pointed this out, where there's a happy ending, the sum of all fears. But a nuke went off in some American city, and at the end, he and I think it's Bridget Moynihan are celebrating. And of course, you have to go on and have your own life, but a lot of people died, and I think in that area. And in this case, a ton of the world died. But then we said on Independence Day, same thing. Didn't I promise you fireworks at the very end? Steve, Will Smith's character, says to the kid. Billions of people have died the last couple of days.
Maybe not the time for jokes. One of the many very silly things that it does that makes it deeply unrealistic is it just focuses this story about the entire world on just this group of people. Liv Tyler's freaking out, you better bring my father and my fiancé back, what are you doing? Because it's as if everybody cares about the success of this mission and nobody ever really dwells on what the failure will mean. Because you think one person would have a moment of, oh man, this is so serious. We could not just all die, but it would just be the end of history. The end of all life on Earth, even viruses, as they say.
Right. Yet there's wisecracking on the rock when there's important things going on. We'll mock the movie plenty, but I'm more of a fan, I think, than you are.
I think so, too.
Rotten Tomatoes, though, they're not. And I think these numbers change because I had some like 38% of critics, which is still a failure, but 43 is what I see now. I think maybe a lot of people reviewed it, or maybe I took bad numbers.
Well, it turned 25 this year, so...
Maybe that's it. And there are 176 reviews on the site. I think it was 140-something when I looked not that long ago. 5.3 to 10 is the average, but 73% of audiences. And incidentally, for Michael Bay, The Rock and Ambulance are the only two fresh tomatoes that he's ever directed. No Transformers movies, Pain and Gain, which I think was actually interesting by his standards anyway. Anyway, only 2 movies ever, and I'm a big fan of The Rock. This was number 2 at the U.S. box office in 1998. Saving Private Ryan was number 1. There's Something About Mary was number 3. The Truman Show was number 12. And Shakespeare in Love, with Ben Affleck, was number 18. We've covered all those movies. They're all back in the archives somewhere. But interestingly, Saving Private Ryan made about $15 million more domestically than Armageddon did. But Armageddon made more than $70 million worldwide over Saving Private Ryan.
Even though Armageddon might be the more patriotic film, strangely enough.
And they're both very patriotic. And then those two guys, Spielberg and Bay, went on to make the Transformers film. Spielberg produced them for Bay. I don't know how many he produced. I think he's an executive producer on all of them.
Yeah, Michael Bay has said many times that he's a huge Spielberg fan.
I think they get along pretty well, too, even though Spielberg, for whatever faults he has, seems like a sensitive person, and Bay seems like he's a bleep, bleep.
He has a reputation.
Yeah. I thought this movie had swearing in it, but it doesn't really because they wanted the entire market, if you will, kids to go too. So I don't think there's even any swearing at all. So
there's one F-bomb?
Well, you can say one.
Yeah.
Then you get a PG-13 at worst, maybe even a PG. The film is 164th on Box Office Mojo's list of top 200 adjusted for inflation between Kramer versus Kramer and Psycho. What a trilogy that would be in one night of watching movies. The film was nominated for 4 Oscars. The sound and the sound effects, that makes sense, although there's no sound in space. The visual effects and Diane Warren's song, I Don't Wanna Miss a Thing. Of course, she wrote it, but Aerosmith performed it. It was also nominated for 7 Razzies, including I Don't Wanna Miss a Thing. There can't be too many examples, I didn't look it up, of a song getting nominated for an Oscar and also a Razzie. And this song was nominated for the top 100 songs on the AFI's list. And maybe should have made it. I think this song is good, and I think it's one of those songs that everyone knows. It's iconic.
You couldn't escape it that summer. So I think overexposure probably is what did it in.
That might be true, yeah. We talked about this, I think, during the Independence Day podcast, and you said you loved this movie when you were a kid, but you were also 25 years younger. I've seen this movie, I think, probably...
Kid is generous to call me a kid when this movie came out. I was 20 years old.
That's a kid. I could almost be your grandfather when you were that age. But I've seen this movie a few times since then. I guess you haven't. And I've always liked it. And I think one of the reasons why I said a few minutes ago is partly that you've got these interesting actors. Yeah, maybe the tone's a little off, like it is in Independence Day sometimes. Because wisecracking, yeah, you want a fun movie, but you're dealing with incredibly serious and also timely problems here. These guys are wisecracking. But I still had a good time with this. I laughed a lot of the time, too, or at least chuckled. What'd you think of it?
I've always defended this movie because I know it's bad, but I also have this great memory of seeing it in theaters when it came out and loving it. But, you know, I was wrong. It's really stupid. And in all the same ways that Independence Day and Air Force One are stupid, but it's bad because it replaces anything potentially artful with this crass commercial style of filmmaking and this vision of the world that is just overwhelmingly macho and American. It's beyond parody. So, you know, shame on my younger self for enjoying this movie so much. No shame on anybody who loves this movie. It is still fun.
I will not be shamed.
It is over 2 hours long, and
2.5.
I never really felt bored. I was never like, all right, let's wrap it up.
Maybe because the shot average length is maybe a minute and a half long, or second and a half long, not a minute and a half at all, but a second and a half long.
It's dizzying. It'd be one thing if it was just the action sequences. I can dig into the way he directs action, which is absolutely unintelligible. There is no...
Unlike Spielberg.
Spielberg is the opposite. He has such a great handle on the physical action and how to display it. Whereas it seems like Michael Bay's strategy is, well, we'll just cut every 30 seconds. Nothing needs to make any visuals. 30 seconds, what are you talking about? Every
30 frames.
20 frames, yeah. we'll cut every 30 frames and everything will make no sense. We'll cross the axis. We will just shake the camera a bunch. We'll add a bunch of sound effects and get the actors to make big expressions. And there's your action scene. Nobody
Constantly
needs to
moving
know.
camera as well.
Yeah. He has a knack for making a very compelling image.
I think so.
It's just that he
And
can't
story.
chill out when we're in a slow, quiet scene. Every scene, he uses the same strategy that he would use in the action sequences.
Needed Woody Allen to come in and direct the sequences where people are just having a conversation.
Just let a shot rest. Let the actor do their job and carry the weight of this scene. You don't need to cut constantly. Give us a breather, too. 2.5 hours of this is borderline nauseating. Of course, I am 45 years old.
And an editor also.
And an editor, I know. But it drives me so crazy. I find this style of editing unbelievably sloppy. There's no art to it whatsoever. It's almost just like he had a mandate to cut every second and a half, as you said, without any motive behind making those editorial choices, especially in the quiet scenes. So a big part of me complaining about this is my 45-year-old perspective of somebody who is an editor, but also is just a middle-aged lady that doesn't have an appetite for this kind of movie anymore, the way 20-year-old Bev went to the theater and never gave a second thought to that. Or the way the science is wrong in this movie is aggressive.
It's one of many movies that have gotten space wrong, including Star Wars.
Getting the odd thing wrong is one thing, and Star Wars is definitely guilty of this, but Star Wars can also say, well, it's the future, we don't know what kind of technology they have.
It's the long ago past.
Oh, you're right. It's a long, long time
But it's a
ago.
sci-fi
Right.
film. This is not really sci-fi. One of the things about this is that it starts with Charlton Heston, one of the biggest names in the history of movies, doing the voiceover, the narration. It happened before. It will happen again. I don't think he's wrong. And I'm not sure this is true, but my instinct is that if something like this was ever happening, never mind the size of Texas, if it was the size of our house coming for this planet, okay, maybe that you could defend. But okay, something as big as a state, what are you going to do to it? Probably nothing. We probably will all die if something like this is coming for us. And what do we do? It might be like in Don't Look Up. Well, in this movie, actually, the whole point about Armageddon, Billy Bob even says it's the worst parts of the Bible if this gets out to the general public. That's why they don't say anything. It's just the drill team that knows this, and Liv Tyler, and then the government, NASA, whatnot. No one else knows. I don't think any other countries even know about this until, I think it's Shanghai gets hit, and then later on it's Paris that gets hit. Then, of course, people realize, okay, New York was hit by stuff, but meteor showers can happen. Why would it happen again, I don't know, a week and a half later, whatever it's supposed to be? That's when the story gets out. And you don't really see Armageddon on the planet the way they talk about what would happen. Maybe that's a budget thing. Maybe they don't want to show everybody looting, like
Again,
in, say, 28 weeks later.
Laser focused
28 days
on the
later.
group, on the mission.
Yeah, right. But I do like that notion that it happened before, it'll happen again. And I think that's also probably in reality something that is true. And the movie I just covered last Friday, Superman, Lex Luthor's plot is to nuke the San Andreas Fault. So he has a new coastline with land he bought in the interior part of California. The fallout would ruin that, but okay, fine. But people say that we are way overdue for volcanoes to go off on this planet, and also for the San Andreas Fault to do something way more serious than it ever really has.
Something we talked about when we talked about Shortcuts.
Tens of millions of people live. Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, and they're all like, it wasn't the big one. There's this tension if you live in California that you're constantly waiting for the big one.
That's true. So last week, both Shortcuts and Superman dealt with earthquakes, and now we're dealing with something like this. All these things we can't control, and I don't know what we do about any of it. So to make this movie fun, and for me to still care about it at 49 years old, when I'm certainly very cynical, I think this is a pretty good achievement. It's one of my favorite movies. I still like The Rock the best, and the first Transformers film was fun. I'm not a fan of his otherwise. I do like some of the things he's produced, because when you go on Rotten Tomatoes and look up Michael Bay, he was involved in A Quiet Place, which is John Krasinski's movie. That got great reviews, and a few other films did too. His Platinum Dunes production company, and he was involved in some horror films that, whether they got good reviews or not, I liked them, or got something out of them anyway. But his own directing career, yeah, it's almost like he needed somebody, like a Spielberg, to say, okay, Mike, you got some good things going on here, but maybe we can just tone this down. But then Spielberg seemed to enable him when they worked on Transformers, because the sequels especially were just terrible. You don't like this movie? Those are way worse.
So say what you want about his style and the flaws in Michael Bay's directing. He has never directed a film that lost money. Not
Really?
once. And all of these huge budget features. So we can sit here on our high horse and say, well, this is not art. But it's commerce at the very least. And even to say it's not art, you can't deny that the man has a style. He is one of those directors that when you watch a Michael Bay film, you know pretty quickly you're watching a Michael Bay film. So he is an auteur. We can just disagree on whether or not he has good taste. But I think he has a good eye for making a movie for a certain kind of person.
And he loves to show the American flag.
Oh my God.
It makes sense in this movie.
Is
and also, they got to shoot in the NASA facilities, some of the scenes anyway, and there's all kinds of stories on the IMDb about how Ben Affleck especially was messing around and they were told, don't go here, don't go there. And I think they were allowed to be outside of one of the rockets or something, but you can't go inside, and Affleck quickly did, and he was really scolded for that. And he wasn't a huge name yet, but he was still a pretty well-known name, I think. Well enough anyway.
An Oscar winner.
And then Bruce Willis, I think, also did something. Was, okay, fine, Bruce, but don't do that again. Why were they allowed to do these things when no one else is? Because they make NASA heroes. Now, yes, these are the drillers, but they're part of NASA. They're astronauts now. And look at that shot at the end, after they've saved Earth, when the last second pushes the button. You see a couple of kids with these makeshift soapbox racer type things with NASA logos on them. So when NASA gets to be the heroes, then I could see why they would help them make this movie.
Although they make all the NASA people look like nebbishy nerds.
I think they probably would like that.
But they are fools. They're always buffoons. And they have all this whole plan.
That's more the government.
He hates the government. He loves the military. Obviously, he likes NASA. But government bureaucracy are often the villains in his film.
Well, we're talking about the president and his people more so than NASA. That do the wrong thing. Keith David's character. Keith David is the Joint Chiefs guy, I guess. So basically he's one of the most important people in the entire country.
He's the guy that walks in the room and goes, "What are you doing? Do this instead. Yeah. What's going on? You got 24 hours. He's that guy who ramps up the conflict by making irrational demands. It's lazy writing, but the real heroes of a lot of Michael Bay films, and certainly this one, are the working class heroes. You know, these egg-headed NASA scientists. Who are these guys? They may know a lot about space, but do they know about anything else? The way Bruce Willis just saunters into every room and smugly tells the country's greatest minds that they just don't know anything.
Also, I'm not asking you. I'm telling you to give these guys a night off.
Who are you? Literally, the fate of the world is at stake. And I think that NASA, maybe give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they know a little bit what they're doing, but there's this massive working class fantasy in this film that everybody with an education is a big phony and everything they think they can do, a regular Joe could do better. Bro, do you need to be smarter than an astronaut?
Well, then again, Jason Isaacs' character and obviously Billy Bob's character are heroic, or at least heroic enough, especially Billy Bob.
But they're heroic because they put faith in Harry. They're heroic because they silence everybody else in the room and they go, no, let the oil driller take control of this mission. He clearly knows more than anyone.
Now, what about them going up on the mission in the first place? Affleck says on the commentary, I think it's on the Criterion DVD.
So funny.
This movie got to be a Criterion, as did The Rock. Criterion DVDs back when that wasn't a common. There are a lot of Criterion DVDs.
It was a news story when Criterion decided to pick Armageddon. It was the first.
I think we're talking 15 years ago,
quote,
quite a long time
popular
ago.
film.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah. All these really art films, these classics, these foreign films. Most people had not heard of, and it was a good rule of thumb to say if Criterion released something, then you should pay attention. Yeah. You should get to know this movie. And then Armageddon comes out. Money must have exchanged hands. There's just no way.
But here's the point. So Affleck on the commentary, I said to Michael, wouldn't it have made more sense to just train astronauts to be drillers? And he told me to shut the F up. But I do think that they make it work well enough when it's supposed to be that Bruce Willis and his daughter gets to go too, so Grace gets to go too. But it's really just that they want Harry Stamper, the best driller in the world. He doesn't have his team yet. He's supposed to train. He wouldn't even go with them. It's not a matter of his whole team. He wouldn't go either. He would train them, but he sees what they did with his drilling thing that they're going to take up there. Yeah. He criticizes that, and then they say, well, tell us what to do. Well, I'm only the best because I work with the best. I think that in a movie like this works well enough. It's not ideal, but I've seen way worse explanations than that to bring up the people that are so good at this. Because he said, I've been drilling for, 40 years or something like that, my whole life.
Third generation driller.
And I haven't figured it all out yet. By the way, his father in the deleted scenes apparently is Lawrence Tierney. My way or the highway? What's it going to be, Mr. Pink? Of course, Buscemi is in Reservoir Dogs. But Lawrence Tierney is his dad in the deleted scenes, so he also was a driller. So I think when you put it that way, I can buy it. And also, it's not like these guys go up on their own. They do have 4, or no, I guess it's 6, right? It's 2 astronauts, and then, well, they're all astronauts, but 2 commanders of the mission on each shuttle, and then another person too, I think, right? Well, anyway, there's at least 4 other people up there in total, 2 on each one, maybe it's 3, I forget now, that are the real astronauts. And they're supposed to just drill and then go, if they can get off the rock in the first place. So I bought it. Did you at all?
The idea that they would go to space does not bother me. Thank God this working class hero rolls in and
who's
knows
also
more
probably
than
pretty
any of
wealthy.
them.
That is a big rig they're on when the movie starts.
That man must be stinking rich.
Yeah.
That's his operation. He has clients, the Japanese clients that we see at the beginning of the film, who are paying him to do this, but nobody has a deep water offshore drilling rig unless they are an incredibly rich person.
Yeah.
And oil is big money. So yes, working class doesn't necessarily mean your income. A lot of working class people are very wealthy, and then things that we consider middle class jobs, you can't even get by.
Right, okay.
Somebody who works in a museum is probably making like $45,000 a year, but that's considered a middle class job. So it's more about culture than it is about income.
Well, they do use the word roughneck a few times, especially in the scene where Harry has seen Grace and AJ canoodling, and he's all mad about this, even though he knew they were together in the first place. He shouldn't be that surprised anymore. And then Buscemi and Michael Clark Duncan and Owen Wilson, I think, are all saying, well, Duncan says it, but we all feel like a bunch of daddies here because they all helped raise Grace. But Harry can't accept the fact that she's growing up.
That she's getting drilled by AJ.
Yeah. And when he fires AJ off the rig because of the fact that he wouldn't listen to him when they're out in the middle of nowhere before everything really happens in the film, when we just meet everybody on that rig in the ocean, I think the next scene is when a guy comes in and says, we have 18 days. And yet, when Harry is taken around the world, he says something like 45 hours or whatever it was about a day it took for him to get to NASA. He's told all these things. He has to track people down. He finds AJ, who has started AJ Frost Drilling Company in what's now been, I don't know, 3, 4, or 5 days.
And he's standing in front of a derrick. He already has a drill in the ground.
That escalated quickly.
Well, they certainly don't respect time in any way, shape, or form. There's a line where somebody says, okay, this is what the mission is going to take you. I think they say 90 hours to get to the moon, and they have to shuttle around the moon and come around. That 90 hours in the film looks like it takes about, I don't know, the time it would take these astronauts to go to the bathroom and have a snack. It feels like no time has passed.
Skip ahead.
And you have an opportunity there to build character. They're stuck on a spacecraft for, how many days is that? Like 4 days.
Well, at least 2 days, I think it's supposed to be, that once they leave the Russian space station that blows up, pretty exciting sequence, I think, actually, and then get to the moon, I think it's at least 2 days.
Okay, fine. 2 days. That gives you an opportunity to have a breather, to have your characters get to know
But
each
we see
other.
none of that.
No, why would we want character development? Michael Bay is just not interested.
I think Ebert's biggest criticism, or one of them, in his review of this movie, because I think he hated this movie flat.
Oh, he hated it. He had like an article once, movies I hate the most, and it was listed in that, yeah.
I feel like one of the things I remember him writing about, because I haven't read his reviews for a long time when we do these movies. I probably should, but I haven't in a long time. But I think one of the things he really hated was at the end, I think it's pretty decently well played, actually, Bruce Willis and Ben Affleck, when it's supposed to be that Affleck stays because he draws a short straw, I'll take him down. And then Harry rips the patch off his arm because earlier Truman, the Billy Bob character, said, I wanted to go into space and have the patch on my arm. So a lot of things happen in a few seconds there. I like the emotion, but Ebert's big thing was when Harry says, I always thought of you, son, always. Harry, I love you. And I think Ebert's thing was, where did that come from? Because they were always in conflict. But I think it's supposed to be one of the shorthand things that he didn't say that of him as a son. Maybe that's part of the problem, is that I think of you as the guy that could take over for me one day, and I respect you as my actual son, and you're now boinking my daughter? Maybe it makes the most sense in the world for him to be with his daughter, maybe AJ with Harry's daughter, because, okay, I do think he was a son. I never really said it. Maybe I should have. And I love her. She's always calling me Harry. I like, too, she says daddy at the end. She finally grows up, calls him dad, but calls him daddy. Anyway, I don't buy that entirely either, but Ebert really had a problem with that. But I also thought narratively it made a lot of sense, because Harry has to make sure that his daughter's fiancé gets back to Earth, and he's also the responsible one. I love the moment when they show in the ship, when they barely get off the asteroid in time, and Harry says, tell Chick I couldn't have done anything without him, and they show a close-up on Will Patton's face, and he doesn't start crying, but there are more tears in this movie than you see in most macho action movies. I think I read something about how Affleck said, when he starts crying, when he's in that little thing, the tube that goes back up out of the ship, Harry, I love you, and he's getting all emotional. Affleck's whole point was, we never see guys actually show real emotion in these situations, in a high-stress situation as well. I'm going to do that in this movie.
Ebert complains, and you kind of agree, the moment is not altogether earned.
I do agree.
And there would be so many easy opportunities. You talk about shorthand. The shorthand would just be Ben Affleck has a heroic moment, and he has plenty of heroic moments where he saves the day or he gets that Mars rover or whatever, that little vehicle to them in time.
Damn glad to see you, boy.
Yeah. And without that, they never would have made it because they needed the second drill bit. And all it would have taken is one line, one look, one lingering shot on Bruce Willis admiring this man and thinking, maybe I was wrong about you all along, or maybe I'm the one who's being silly. And I'm not saying it has to be the most sophisticated thing in the world, but it's just the kind of thing that even something that easy, that obvious of a fix to add extra impact to that very important moment at the end, Michael Bay's just not interested.
Yeah.
I think anytime there's a choice that could have made it a more emotionally resonant film, he's like, why bother? I'm just going to make it a bombardment of the senses. I do want to come back, speaking of bombardment of the senses, you mentioned Roger Ebert. I did have to copy a quote from his review of this movie. It goes a little something like this. This movie is an assault on the eyes, the ears, the brain, common sense, and the human desire to be entertained.
Okay.
It goes on from there. And he was pretty forgiving about movies that were strictly entertaining. He was no Pauline Kael, you know?
It's true.
He was never a snob.
He was a critic of the people. I think we've said this before.
Yeah.
The one of the things I like about Ebert is that it feels like, and Hanks is a huger star in his field than even Ebert was as a critic, but if Tom Hanks walks in this room right now, Paul Rudd feels like this too, sit down with us, they would make us feel like we are just cool. Whether we're high-class people, whether we're King Charles, or whether we're somebody who's poor and basically starving to death. There's a lot of people that have wealth and influence that would not do that. A lot of people like us that would not fit in with just anybody. But I think that Hanks would. I think Ebert in some ways as a film critic is like that too, because you just said Kael. She was so smart and a great writer, but remarkably snobby. Ebert had his moments with that, but I don't feel like he went into movies judging them beforehand. And I think that a lot of good critics, including Kael, Andrew Sarris, a lot of these people did.
The more movies I watch and the more you and I analyze movies, the more I feel like my taste in movies is getting snobbier and snobbier. And I feel like it's just I need a bigger challenge. If I'm going to analyze movies and talk about them, I want something that's going to be harder. And a movie like Armageddon that's full of all of these transparent and cliche devices that are just designed to entertain the audience without any thought or artistry, it's just not going to appeal to me because I see right through them, which isn't true about most audiences. So I can see how most critics fall into the Pauline Kael trap of saying this is a bad movie because I can see right through everything it's doing. Well, you can, but the generic audience can't. And as Michael Bay has famously said, I think there was an interview where someone was like, what do you say to the accusation that you make movies for teenage boys? And he's like, I make movies for teenage boys, and teenage boys should have movies that they can see. Their money spends as good as anybody else. I mean, he didn't say
better
these
than
things,
so many. That's the demographic.
They see a lot of movies.
18 to 34-year-old males are the ones that are still pandered to in almost everything entertainment related and sports related, of course, too.
Yeah, video games, you name it, right? They don't care if I like this movie or not. They have a loyal audience that is going to spend money consistently. He'll reuse shots and sequences over and over again in different movies. But I think he probably is like what the audiences saw Armageddon.
Literally take the shot from a previous movie, not redo it.
Use the exact same shot.
Footage they shot maybe 5 years ago.
Like maybe zhuzh it up with some special effects, but
maybe not
even the very same shot.
Yeah.
But he's probably thinking, A, no one's going to notice because no one's looking that closely, or B, the audience that I'm making the movie for now are completely different people. The people who enjoyed Armageddon have outgrown my movies now, so I'm making it for a totally different audience. Who cares if I'm reusing the same
And look
shots?
at nostalgia. And looking up the box office for this, because I told you that it did better than Private Ryan worldwide, but second to it at home. And at home that year, I didn't write everything down, but Saving Private Ryan, number 1. This is number 2. Something About Mary, which we covered a few months ago, is number 3. A comedy. You never see that anymore.
And like a very juvenile comedy.
But my point is, I think there were 4 comedies in the top 10 that year. You don't get any comedies in the top 10 this year, or the last many years. A movie might be funny, but it's not a comedy. Rush Hour was in the top 10 that year. Dr. Dolittle was. And this has a sense of humor too. But I do want to make fun of some things on that note. Why so few hard hats I don't think that people that, what is it, Japanese people that come visit are wearing hard hats, are they? That should be a given when you go on an oil derrick, an active oil derrick, or oil rig, I should say.
Oil rig, yeah. You can't put a hard hat on Liv Tyler. You need her to be lit perfectly in every scene that she's in, so we can't spoil it.
At this point in her life, she can make dirty newspapers look good. Wearing them, I mean.
At this point, is in like at the age she's at now.
She was so pretty at this point.
When she's, oh my gosh, she's so beautiful.
We just watched that thing you do a little while ago because you'd never seen it before and you liked it a lot. But I had seen it, I think not that long ago, maybe 5 months ago or even less. I'll watch it again probably in a few more months.
It's a great movie.
But as much as I love many things about that movie, the music, Steve Zahn's so funny, it's not just her looks, because she's pretty, but she's so lovely in that movie. She's so likable. And she doesn't have a lot of good things to do in this movie. I want to root for her. What did you think of her and Affleck together? Of course, people make fun of the animal crackers scene. What's the big deal? People
you want to focus on something stupid in this movie, and that's what you
That's
get.
their
like,
version of, not foreplay. I think they've already probably done it, or they're about to do it, but they're just messing around with...
It's corny. Maybe it's a little extra silly, but if you've ever been in love and you've never done something a little on par with the animal cracker silliness, well, then I pity you that you've just never been that mushy with somebody. It didn't feel like the least genuine scene in that movie by a country mile. I think maybe there was some backlash against Affleck or something, but God, it was so funny that people focus on that. I think the two of them have excellent chemistry. I mean, they're two young, gorgeous people, good actors. If they didn't like each other, I was totally fooled.
Well, they were on Jersey Girl together as well.
Oh, there you go. So
there's a love interest situation because Affleck's wife is J-Lo, but she dies early on. He's got this daughter, and that's the storyline, is that he ends up getting involved with Liv Tyler's character, and of course that's a Kevin Smith movie.
They're both the kinds of actors that could probably have chemistry with just about anybody because they just have likability.
I like the scene when he sings Leaving on a Jet Plane to her as well, and especially when Buscemi, Michael Clark Duncan, and somebody else, maybe Owen Wilson, anyway, they pitch in. Steve Buscemi, leaving, and then Michael Clark Duncan, leaving on a jet plane.
This movie has a massive cast, and it makes sense because of the plot, but it is remarkable how few women. The whole world's gonna get destroyed. Don't worry, there's only one woman.
No. Jessica Steen as the co-pilot?
Yes.
I think she's pretty cool.
She is pretty cool. Kudos to them to cast a woman in that role because they could have very easily cast yet another man in
She's
that
also
role.
got one of the better lines in the whole film, I think. It's not the most creative thing of all time, but just when they're on the Russian space station, it's about to blow up, and AJ and Lev are caught, and they're probably going to die, but she says, it's them or all of us. I'm with you. We can't leave without AJ. Maybe this isn't a priority if all of you die, because then not only do you all die, but then everybody dies on the entire planet. I talked about humor, though. This isn't funny, but I always love that William Fichtner is Willie Sharp. And it even says that in the credits. He's not William Sharp. He's Colonel or Commander Willie Sharp. Willie.
Some of them have pretty funny names, like AJ Frost and Chick Chapel, Rockhound, Oscar Choice. That's the name of Owen Wilson's character. I'm like, are you trying to tell the Academy something? Oscar Choice?
He's supposed to be, I think, a teenager as well, but also brilliant, which is fine. He could be brilliant, but he's basically a kid. Also, this cowboy, when they track him down, he's on his ranch.
It's a ranch.
But he's one of the ones that does die when, what did I say, Freedom is the one that goes down, or Independence? I think Independence is the one that, Independence is the rocket that goes down. So the guy who plays Noonan dies, Owen Wilson dies, but Lev, Bear, and AJ do survive.
And that was the point where I did start yelling at the screen because of the
machine gun?
Why do you have a what are they called?
Gatling gun.
Gatling gun? Why would you bring that on the mission? Why is there gas coming out of the asteroid? Like, that's another Michael Bay thing. He just loves fog machines. There's no atmosphere on an asteroid. At some point, there's a storm. There's all this debris flying around. There's no wind. There's no air to push these objects around.
They do say that there'd be some gravity on the asteroid, and also they have the gravity boots. And Jessica Steen's character, Watts, says about how you've got these reverse booster type things. So if I kick you in the balls and you don't have these things working, then you're going to float off into space, which is what inspires them, or at least AJ, to try the Evel Knievel jump with the armadillo, which of course is dumb, but it's also very fun.
Well, they have no other option.
But they've got the anti-gravity thing with the machine, but also with their suits. I can buy that. But what I don't buy so much is when things like the pipes that they use to drill, they throw them off bang, crash. They should just float into space.
Or fall really gently.
Right, at
We've
least,
all seen footage of people on the moon. We know what that low gravity looks like, and that would be much more gravity than on this asteroid. Another thing that drove me absolutely insane is when they show the rockets going around the moon. They always talk about this asteroid the size of Texas, but the moon is actually massive. It's 1/3 of the size of the Earth. It only looks small to us because it's incredibly far away. It's absurd the way they get the scale wrong, and even to the extent that they go around the moon, and it takes them like 30 seconds. What are you talking about?
Apparently when this happened, when they went on moon missions in reality, this is the thing that terrified the people on the ground the most. I'm not so sure.
That's
people
when you're out
actually,
of communications, right? Yeah.
Because the 3 guys are completely on their own. And I guess it wasn't in the dark because they had power on the spaceship, Apollo 13 notwithstanding. Well, they had power, basic power at least. But yeah, everyone was worried about maybe they don't come back. Maybe they somehow don't stay in the moon's gravity and fly off in the middle of nowhere and we never get them back again. Although I guess it always, well, obviously, they never lost an American in space on these kinds of missions, the moon missions. But what's even better, of course, is when they come around there and then let's amplify the rockets and then get on the back of the asteroid. These guys are being pushed back by gravitational forces that NASA guys probably couldn't handle. They certainly can, yet they're able to go, what's going on? This is the worst thing ever. It probably should be... Yeah. If you even make the noise I just made, that would be something. You probably couldn't even make a noise at all.
Go into a tight close-up and shake the camera.
Yeah.
There you go. That's your action for you.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, it was 1998. He still does a lot of practical effects. That I will give him credit for, that he's still pretty dedicated to doing things practical. Not, obviously, the Transformers. But there's going to be an explosion in this movie, then he blows stuff up. And I think that's a huge part of the appeal, is we all like watching things blow up.
Yeah.
Everything, every object in this world is flammable. Not just flammable, explosive. Yeah. The way things explode. But it's for teenage boys.
The line, by the way, Rockhound says to Harry, I guess all of it, Harry specifically, about how they're on top of tens of thousands of moving parts built by the lowest bidder. That whole line apparently was said by Alan Shepard, an actual astronaut. Makes you feel really good, doesn't it? Gives you a lot of confidence.
Does NASA go for the lowest bidder?
Well, also, apparently Buscemi took this role because he wanted to be not sleazy in a movie for once. He'd been sleazy so often.
But he's
Hang on. Because when they wrote the screenplay, he was the egghead. He was the guy that was like the Jason Isaacs character, but part of this team where it's, well, actually, we should do this thing. He does say he's a genius. He knows all about how they landed on an iron plate, and that's going to be even harder to dig through. But he's also horny, as Liv Tyler says. So he went into the filming thinking he was going to play more of an erudite character. And we've seen Buscemi on talk shows, especially Colbert, a few times. He is the nicest person maybe in the world. He's nothing like Mr. Pink or this guy or the characters he's played, or obviously the guy in Con Air the year before this movie. He's such a nice guy, and he wanted to play more himself, I guess, for once. And then they changed it on him. And yet the funny thing is he wasn't too mad about it because he worked with Bay again. He was in The Island, at least. I think he was in a few other Bay movies. But he also, like other people in this movie, did it for the money.
Well, Buscemi was this indie film darling.
Yeah.
I think there's like a quote from William H. Macy on why he had this incredible success and all this respect that he got from the indie films, and then he made Jurassic World, or was it the third one?
The third one. But, well, also he was in Air Force One.
Right. People were like, why would you sell out and do these movies? And he's like, the money, stupid. I would like to buy a vacation home. What do you think? And he didn't say it like that, but
the best line anyone's ever had about that, I think, is Michael Caine with Jaws: The Revenge. I've never seen it. By all accounts, it's terrible. I have seen the vacation home it built, and I know that's nice.
Right, exactly. Let these beloved indie film stars cash in.
Do you not agree, though, that Buscemi, Peter Stormare, Owen Wilson, who wasn't really that well known yet, and some of the other guys in the film, Billy Bob, who wasn't that well known at this point.
And also was like an indie darling.
Of course, he won the Oscar, so he was better known.
Sure, Sling Blade
has he ever been a star, really? Bruce Willis, of course, is a star. Liv Tyler, I guess you could call her a star. Bruce Willis, though, by far is the biggest name in this whole movie. But do not agree that names like Thornton and Wilson and Buscemi, Stormare, those kinds of guys, Fichtner, I guess, too, give it that kind of credibility of people that would never be in a movie like this normally.
The people who go to see this movie don't know who they are anyway.
Yeah.
I don't think that they give the movie credibility. I think they just genuinely contribute their talent. These are really talented actors. We talk about Steve Buscemi playing dirtbags all the time. He has this gift for playing the worst character and making you love them.
Look at Con Air.
Look at Con Air, look at Fargo, look at Reservoir Dogs. He's playing the worst person in all of these movies. Even Con Air, literally a movie about convicts. And he's the child murderer, and you somehow catch yourself rooting for him.
Yeah.
Even though he looks... Not to be rude about it, but he is an ugly man.
Yeah.
And yet his charisma
hang on.
transcends all of it.
He's kind of funny looking.
I
don't know. Just funny looking.
Count me among his fans. I adore him. And I see him in Armageddon every time he's on screen. I'm just like, where is he now? Where did he go? Bring him back.
He's got space dementia.
He's so stupid.
Is space dementia a thing?
His role is so terrible. That comes out of nowhere. It makes no sense. More additional conflict for no good reason.
That's why it's there.
Yeah, totally. And they're letting him kind of be funny, too. Because he is one of the funnier people in the movie.
And he gets to work again with Stormare, at least briefly. They don't really share very many scenes.
But they were in Fargo together.
But they were the team in Fargo, and also, of course, the same year as this, Big Lebowski.
I don't think they share a scene. No, they definitely don't
No,
share
they
a scene.
do.
Lebowski.
It's the scene where he dies. It's Walter and the dude and Donnie facing off against the nihilists. We believe in nothing. And that's when Donnie dies of the heart attack. Man down, dude. So anyway, yeah, they work together a lot in this time frame. Peter Stormare really hams it up, but he's fun as the Russian cosmonaut. Agreed. One of the many things about this movie that I will let slide, but I'm going to criticize it for right now. When the ship won't take off, and then it's, I want to get out of here. Bang, bang, bang. And then it works.
I mean...
No time. He's banging on something, making Jessica Steen get out of the way. And then it works. But then again, time. They have something like 38 minutes to drill. I think it's hundreds of feet. Because of AJ coming down with the armadillo, they do it. Okay. But then they've got to cut the drilling thing, the bit out of there. There's that whole thing, and then AJ nearly gets killed. He gets blasted off into space for a minute, and he barely hangs on to just another exciting sequence, I guess. But then there's the drawing lots scene. Harry, I love you, all that stuff. They get up in the spaceship, they're ready to go, but it won't fire off because the ship isn't working. Watts has been trying to fix it this whole time. And then Harry has a chance to say goodbye to Grace, and they still haven't left. But here's the part that I think is the most fun about all this, because they had no time. But they do get off the asteroid. Harry gets blown off and nearly killed as well. But at the last second blows up the rock. But before he does, we got to go back and do it ourselves, is what Willie Sharp says. I think it's supposed to be a minute to go. It would take them that long just to get back and land. I guess you could say we got to blow up and we'll die, but they wouldn't get back in time to even land and get off to find the plunger to do it.
And the way the whole mission was dependent on them doing it in this short period of time. You couldn't have left one day earlier. And then there could have been like contingency time where everybody has a little breather. Oh, the drill bit broke. It's okay. We can replace it with this other one. No, everything has to be a total emergency. How many ticking clocks are there? They even managed to fit in a scene where a nuclear bomb is going to go off. Do I cut the blue wire or the red wire?
Right, yeah.
It's such a cliche.
Although it's decent writing, I think, actually, that the reason why somebody has to stay behind is because the bomb remote is ruined by that rock storm. And then you get, of course, Harry being the one to sacrifice. And I will bring it up. I brought it up before. So spoiler alert on Bruce Willis movies. When he was on Inside the Actors Studio a long time ago, James Lipton, you died in, maybe this movie, but whatever it was, you died in Armageddon. Doesn't happen a lot. And I remember thinking then, he dies more than most major stars have ever died. The Sixth Sense, the year after this. Armageddon, obviously. 12 Monkeys, he dies. Again, saving the world. He dies in Mortal Thoughts. He dies in so many... Sin City. He dies in so many movies. Yes, Die Hard, obviously. He never dies in those movies, because how could he when it's called that? But in not most, but so many major movies for a giant star like Bruce Willis, he's died plenty of times. Now, of course, we now know the last couple of years, I guess it's been, that they announced, his family did, that he's got... Is it called aphasia?
Well, I think they have upgraded it to just dementia at this point.
And he's not that old. He's not even 70 yet.
I know. It's pretty heartbreaking.
Yeah, because he's said a lot of things, and he's a hardcore Republican. I don't think he's a Trump guy exactly. I think he's more of a George Bush the first, or even George Bush Jr. type Republican, which I can respect, I guess. But anyway, I think a lot of people who maybe would have been against him if he was more vocal, because I think he probably would have been about some of the things that have happened in the last few years with the pandemic and masks and whatnot. But because he's basically been out of the public eye and has made all these movies that nobody watches, and he's barely in them, which is partly because I think he was being lazy. This was true. Kevin Smith has told stories about this long ago, before the aphasia was ever an issue. But it's also a matter, I think, for a long time now, where he probably didn't really know what was going on. So he would only appear on shots that showed his face in these movies that no one watches anyway, that go straight to video, or maybe they get released in, I don't know, Germany or something like that, where he was born, ironically enough. I'll be one of the people that says, yeah, maybe Bruce Willis was wrong about a lot of things, but he was one of the great stars of the last
Truly.
almost 40 years now, certainly 30 years. We've covered him in Die Hard and Pulp Fiction. He's got the cameo at the end of The Player as well, by the way. 12 Monkeys, The Sixth Sense, Sin City, dying in so many of those again. And I don't know, maybe we've covered him in other things, but he is a tremendous movie star, and I think he brings a lot to this movie. I think it's this, or maybe it's something else, but he had some kind of weird deal going on with Disney where he didn't do a movie they wanted him to do, and he had to agree to do other things.
He didn't make much money for this movie.
So, okay, if that's the case.
It was to, like, appease Disney
so
for
it's this,
backing out of something
and
else.
The Sixth Sense he agreed to, two of his biggest hits ever.
Truly. When you think about a Bruce Willis movie, Die Hard, obviously, but yeah, Sixth Sense and Armageddon are way up there for what we are always going to remember him for.
And he dies in both of them. And I think he does bring a lot of star power to this, because when you look at the credit list, scrolling back, so it's Bruce, Billy Bob, Ben, Liv, Will Patton, Steve Buscemi, William Fichtner, Owen Wilson, Michael Clark Duncan, Peter Stormare, Ken Hudson Campbell, the guy in the hallway in Groundhog Day. Chow! A lot of good actors in there, but the average person knew very few of these people.
I guess Good Will Hunting came out
the year before, and so was Chasing Amy. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and Chasing Amy.
He'd been acting for a long time, as had Damon, but neither of them were that well known around this time. But then this very year, I already said Saving Private Ryan. His best friend at that point anyway, one of his close friends in his entire life, is the title character in that other movie.
And have we mentioned yet that she's, of course, Steve Tyler's daughter, Steve
Yes.
Tyler from Aerosmith? Yeah.
Who doesn't want to miss a thing? There are a lot of Aerosmith songs in this movie, by the way. We hear Sweet Emotion, we hear Come Together, and I think one other song. And of course, this song isn't theirs. They sing it, but it's Diane Warren's. She's been nominated so many times for Oscars. She won an honorary award, I think it was this year, or maybe it was last year. One of the last 2 years.
She's like the Susan Lucci of...
Right.
Yeah.
Never won a competitive award. She got an honorary award, partly because she's written so many good songs. The song in Con Air the year before this, she wrote that one too. How do I live? That's a good song.
It was a juggernaut hit, too.
Let's talk about the cast now. I just mentioned Bruce Willis's credits. Ben Affleck was in Good Will Hunting, Shakespeare in Love, Dogma, and Argo. We've covered all of those. Liv Tyler, I think the only thing we've ever covered before was the first Lord of the Rings film, which was on the AFI's list. Billy Bob, we've covered in A Simple Plan, The Man Who Wasn't There, and Bad Santa. I've said on those other podcasts that he's one of the better and more underrated character actors, and just actors, doesn't have to be character actor, maybe in the last 25 or 30 years. I think he's good in all those movies, and I think he's pretty good in this, too. I think he's one of the best things in the movie, actually. And it was his idea to have the leg brace to say, I could have been an astronaut, but I was held back by something physical. And that's why he talked about having the patch on his arm, and Harry remembers that line that had been said to him a few days ago and makes sure to get the patch to AJ.
I mean, I'm a Billy Bob fan. Even though I acknowledge he is probably absolutely insufferable.
Especially with the music thing.
Beyond the music thing, he just seems like a real piece of work. So between Michael Bay, Billy Bob, and Bruce Willis, there was probably a lot of ego on this set.
Ego-geddon.
Yeah. Yes.
Arma ego. Buscemi, though, not an ego there. Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Fargo, Big Lebowski, Ghost World. We've covered all of those in the past. Will Patton. I thought we'd never covered him before. Chris and I had. He's in Remember the Titans. He's the other coach in that movie. So that was on Scoring at the Movies I did with Chris, of course, in my defunct podcast. But he's in Minari. He's the weird guy.
Oh, he is.
And he's very good in that film.
Oh my gosh, I love that movie.
Willie Sharp, William Fichtner, was in The Dark Knight, The Longest Yard, and Blaze of Glory. Those last two I covered with Chris on Scoring at the Movies. Owen Wilson. I think the only two times we've ever covered him are the Wes Anderson films, The Royal Tenenbaums and Grand Budapest Hotel, where he has a very small role. I don't think we've ever covered Owen Wilson in anything else. Michael Clark Duncan was in Sin City. We covered that, of course, and he got an Oscar nomination the year after this, and apparently got the role largely because of Bruce Willis in The Green Mile, because they needed somebody to play that character that Stephen King had written for The Green Mile. But how do you find a giant black man who can act? And they had this guy, and he was terrific in that for sure, and I think he's pretty good in this too. I was reading, though, that he wasn't really bringing it early on, because he was fairly new to acting at this point, and Willis and maybe Michael Bay came along and said, knowing them, it probably wasn't as nice as it sounds online, but you got to start doing more, guy, or we're going to have to fire you. And that's when we saw things like him ripping off the gown when they're all being examined and flexing, yeah, and come get Papa Bear, some of those kinds of things. And he's such a lovable, likable guy. Peter Stormare has 200 credits, or more than that, I think, on the IMDb. And I said already he was in Fargo and The Big Lebowski with Buscemi around this exact same time frame, a couple of years there. They were together so many times. Talked about Ken Hudson Campbell in Groundhog Day. Jessica Steen mostly did TV, but she's hot and also pretty cool in this. I like her role. Chris Ellis, who's in charge of one of the people he's in charge in the control room at NASA, was in Apollo 13 doing a similar job. He's Deke Slayton. Jason Isaacs, I like his role as the nerd. I forgot how much he's in the movie because I don't think I knew who he was the first few times I saw the film, but then, of course, through the Harry Potter movies, he was in all of those, or a lot of those. But he's in so many of the scenes whenever Thornton is explaining stuff to these guys. He's basically the right-hand man. He's the smartest man on the planet. He's the one that explains if you blow an explosive off in your hand, not a big deal. Close your hand, blow the explosive, your fingers are gone. Keith David was in The Thing, of course, one of the two that survived. Well, the end of the movie, not the end of the storyline, really, if you think about it. And Requiem for a Dream, of course, too. And that sinister role at the very end. And you got people like Eddie Griffin, Ellen Cleghorn, Grace Zabriskie. She's Dottie.
Yeah, the asteroid is named after her.
Right.
Yeah.
So they've got character roles in this, and I mentioned Heston is the narrator already. And the guy who plays the president here was also the president in The Rock. Same guy.
Oh my God, really? That's cool.
We've talked about Michael Bay's credits, I think, already, but one thing I got to mention is that I read online he thinks this is his worst film. I think he felt like he was rushed. Maybe that's why. I don't agree anyway, but if he's rushed and he makes a movie as exciting as this and successful as this, he's made worse films. He thinks this is his worst film. Are you kidding me? Jonathan Hensley was a writer, as was J.J. Abrams, the C student, I like to call him, because I don't know why this guy's so revered. He's made okay stuff, but... And then Tony Gilroy, who's actually very talented. The Bourne Identity movies, he worked on those. Now he's doing Andor. But those are some pretty good names writing this movie. I think there are probably another 19 people that probably actually wrote, but they're the ones in there.
Isn't there like 5 credited writers when you break down story by, adapted from what? The writing credits are so strange.
Hensley and Abrams get screenplay credit. Tony Gilroy, Shane Salerno get adaptation credit. Robert Roy Poole and Hensley get story credit.
Yeah, okay. So that's 6 writers?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, 5 writers, and that's just who got credit. So there was probably like an army of writers working behind the scenes. It's the kind of movie where that's always the case.
And the producer was Jerry Bruckheimer. He worked so often with Michael Bay and also Ridley Scott and has made so many big things, so many TV successes as well. He's the Amazing Race guy. He's won, I think, multiple Emmys for that. Bay produced this movie too, and Gail Ann Hurd, who's known for the James Cameron movies, of course, Terminator, Aliens, and so on. Movies 2, 3, 9 to 1 we saw on Disney Plus, although we own the DVD. The cinematographer, John Schwartzman. He shot The Rookie and Seabiscuit that I did with Chris on Scoring at the Movies, and many with Michael Bay. We talked about the editors, Goldblatt, Levinson, and Scantlebury, or did we talk about them? Oh, I meant to. Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about them.
Goldblatt worked on T2, Levinson Top Gun, meaning the first one, and then Scantlebury worked with Francis Ford Coppola. So they've got some pretty good credits. It's maybe not their fault. This is the Michael Bay thing. The composer, Trevor, is it Rabin or Rabin? Maybe Rabin. R-A-B-I-N. Again, Scoring at the Movies. He worked on Remember the Titans, Coach Carter, and Glory Road, movies I covered with Chris on the old podcast that no longer exists. So we talked about a lot of these technical qualities, but what do you want to say about Schwartzman, the editors, Rabin, or Rabin, whatever his name is?
I think the editing is an assault on the senses.
Yeah.
It is one thing to use fast cuts as a crutch when you're trying to ramp up an action scene. It's not top-shelf filmmaking, but at least it makes sense as a technique. But why would this style ever extend to every single scene of the film? We cut from close-up to tracking shot to random cutaway. It's ugly. It's definitely unnecessary. It's distracting. Frustrating, even from the point of view that we can't even just rest on one of those pretty beautifully composed shots that surely cost the crew hours to set up and only gets 40 frames of screen time. I'm not going to fault the technicians. This is Michael Bay's style. He's a man who has a pretty tight control on his films, and this is what he wants, and this is what obviously works in his movies, so it could just be a matter of taste on my part.
If you were to say that he was rushed and this is the result, that I had to do this to cover up some problems, but this is what you always do.
Yeah, exactly. What's your excuse
Have
of
you
every
always
other
been rushed?
movie you've ever made? This is the one Michael Bay film that I don't hate in general. I can make fun of
The
it.
Rock.
I hate The Rock.
I love The Rock.
Everyone loves The Rock. I freaking hate that movie. When I was young, when I was a teenager and I saw that movie, I just thought it was so stupid, and everybody else loved it. Most people will say, oh yeah, Michael Bay is bad, except The Rock.
Oh, I hate Bad Boys too. I talked about what happens next already. It happened before. It will happen again. But that's more reality. I do want to do a fun thing for the movie. Dan Truman runs for president and probably wins. Although the guy who shut down the link up to try to blow off the nuke before it was actually put in, they haven't dug the damn hole yet. That guy's going to get court-martialed. Although maybe Dan has the influence. And they've saved the world, of course, but...
One of the Roughnecks will run for president, and everybody will just love them so much because they're a working-class charm.
Rockhound.
rock.
I think he grabs him by the you know what.
Yeah, no kidding. The guy who admits in the first act of the film that he has sex with underage girls will be president. Hey, that's not that far from what happens in reality, so.
I still like it. I know you don't, but your last thoughts on Armageddon.
Back when I was close to the target demo for this film, I loved it. There's something to be said for that, and the fact that, yes, explosions are cool.
I know it's loud. I know it's galactically stupid. I know why some critics dumped all over it. But I liked it the first time I saw it, and I found it exciting, funny, and touching every time I've seen it since. I've shed some tears. I didn't this time, but I've shed tears.
I definitely cried in the theater when I first saw it, yep.
The Bruce Willis, Liv Tyler goodbye scene, and Harry, I love you. And at the end, Harry will do it. He doesn't know how to fail. And the chick element, too. I couldn't have done anything without him. You mocked it. I like the moment where he goes to see his wife and son, or ex-wife, I guess, and son, when she realizes that he's going to try to save the world. That's your daddy. I liked it. And then at the end, when the kid comes running up.
If they had spent more time on that and less time on training montages, then maybe I could have bought it. But they just give you the broad strokes with no emotional depth. And you have to wonder, what did this guy...
No emotion.
That's it there. You nailed it there. You got to wonder, what did this guy do to not just lose custody of his kid, but to have the courts recommend that he never even see his child? Yeah. You're painting a picture for me here.
Yeah, it feels like he's just an absentee dad, not somebody who actually is a danger.
I guess it's supposed to be, he just has a job or he doesn't get to be home very often. And the courts were like, it's too confusing for you to spend part-time with your kids and come and go. Maybe that's what they're implying, but you didn't tell us, so my imagination is going to get away from me for why this woman is like, you're actually not allowed to see your son at all.
Well, part of the subtext, too, these guys travel the world doing this kind of job, and it seems like they're often on their own. Maybe the idea is that as smart as someone, well, I guess they're all smart in their own way and really good at what they do. They're the best, according to Harry, but they're all screw-ups, especially societally are screw-ups. So maybe Chick did something really terrible 6 or 8 years ago when this kid was first born, or even 2 or 3 years ago, and he's changed a little bit.
He saved the world. He gets to see his kid now.
That's true. So happy 4th of July to our American listeners, and happy Canada Day to our fellow country people, although that holiday was a few days ago. Enjoy some time off and some sun and fun, but of course, be safe and don't get behind the wheel if you've been imbibing. In 7 days, Bev will be off. She would have been off now, but I want to get this podcast up for 4th of July tomorrow. But I'll be in the chair looking at Steve McQueen in Bullet, all by myself. And 4 days later, on the 14th, I'll be sitting in the chair all alone again and jawing about, I think, Adam's Rib. I haven't fully decided yet. I was going to do something else. So the Hepburn-Tracy movie from long ago, we haven't covered them in a long time. Not together, anyway. There's no side chance I won't post anything. Maybe I'll take some of the Fridays off this summer, but I'm planning on Adam's Rib on July 14th. That means the next flick that Bev and I review together will be on July 17th. It will finally be time to cover the film that won Best Picture and many other Oscars just a few months ago. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. EEAAO. The coming attractions, trivia for Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Everyone knows I'm an Oscars guy, so I'm going to go to that well yet again. The Daniels, Scheinert and Kwan, were the 5th pair of collaborators to be nominated for the Best Director Oscar, and the 3rd pair to win, which was the only duo to get nominated twice.
So for the answer to that question, check out our next podcast on July 17th about Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. You obviously already know how to find us, but let me remind you to favorite or subscribe wherever you listen, which is also where you can find our archive of hundreds of episodes that are available for free. We're both on Twitter. I'm at Bev Ellis Ellis, and Ryan is at MovieFiend51. You can also reach us by email. Have you ever seen podcast@gmail.com. You can find our podcast plus bonus material on YouTube at HYES Ellis. And to enjoy freshly roasted premium coffee delivered straight to you in Canada and the US, please go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES and enjoy a 20% discount.
I will stay awake 'cause I am on night shifts. As I post this. Wish I was nestled up beside Bev in bed. I just wanted to say cut so we can end this podcast.
And cut.